This is Ellie Matthewman joining us from London, going to educate us all about the thing that we try not to do until it's too late, which is figuring out how to debug stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is a topic that I hadn't heard of a couple of years back. They always say when you're thinking about talks for events to think about what you wish you knew a few years ago. And this is definitely that. And I've kind of become a little bit obsessed with it. There's still so much more I've got to learn. And you may notice this is all London's Calling branded. London's Calling is like the London equivalent of Mile High Dreaming. And I'll be doing this talk in a couple of weeks at London's Calling, but you guys are all getting a sneak preview of it tonight. So fingers crossed it all goes well. And any feedback you've got for bits that you think weren't relevant or where I went too much or things you thought like more information on will be very welcome so that I can make sure it goes perfectly on London's Calling. But let's get started. So as Paul said, my name is Ellie Matthewman. I am a lead technical developer at a end user in London. I'm also the London Developer User Group leader alongside some names you may or may not have heard of. So Todd Halfpenny, Keir Bowden, also known as Bob Buzzard. I feel very small and minuscule next to them. I won't lie because they're big names. I'm also a community advisory board member. So if you've got any community related feedback, we all want it's all about trying to make the community more inclusive and better for everyone. And so any feedback you've got, good or bad, please let me know. And then last but not least, I'm also Datadog certified. And if you don't know what Datadog is, that's fine. You will soon see its relevance. And if you do know what it is, you will understand its relevance, I expect, at this point. So the first big question that you may be asking is, what is observability? A lot of you may already know, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, observability is about understanding what is happening inside a system without having to open up. And the analogy that I kind of have started to give that's really kind of made this hit home is thinking about a car. So you've got a car and you want to know how much fuel is in that car. You don't go and look in the fuel tank and to see how much fuel. You have an indicator on a dashboard that tells you your fuel. Similar thing for how fast you're going, and all kinds of things like that. So you're not actually opening up the car. Similarly, observability in Salesforce or systems is about finding out what's happening in Salesforce or whatever system it is without actually having to dig deep into it. Observability comes from more general engineering practices. It has been in Salesforce for a while in theory. There's been things around observability available, but it's kind of really starting to become more important because the systems that we're building in Salesforce are becoming much more complex. And so therefore it becomes much more important to be able to have that observability to understand what is going on. Why it's important? It's because it can help you in a short nutshell, it helps you turn from firefighting, as is happening on the, I love that meme on the left, but anyway, it turns you from firefighting to be able to proactively react to things before it happens. So, for example, you're getting close to your data storage. Sometimes you might not realize how close your org is to data storage until you've hit it and you can't do anything else on it. So it's about understanding when you're getting to that point. And that's just one example. There's lots more examples. So it's turning things from hidden issues that you may not know into visible insights and helping us to go from reactive to being proactive about things. So being able to stop things from happening instead of having to react to it. Like I said, observability comes from a more general engineering practice, and they have three main pillars of observability. So the first pillar is traces. Going back to the car analogy, traces is like the detail of the journey, telling you which roads you went down and how long you took to go down those roads. So in a Salesforce sense, it's kind of telling you about your transaction from the moment the user hit save on a record, all the different roads it went down, the validation rules it hit, the flows it hit, all that jazz, until it got to the end of the transaction and actually was committed to the database. So that you may be starting to realize, oh, that sounds like user debug logs. So that's kind of in the Salesforce world what I could kind of relate traces to. It's probably the weakest area from Salesforce observability point of view right now, but it can be useful. The next pillar is metrics. Going back to the car analogy, the metrics are things like your speedometer, your fuel gauge, all that that's on your dashboard, giving you information about that. In the Salesforce world, I tend to there's lots of things you could relate it to, but I tend to relate it to the limits. So things like your organizational limits, the data storage being an example I gave earlier, but also your transactional limits, where you can actually have metrics to see how well you're doing on that. So you can see how healthy your org is, how many more API calls you can do before you're going to get that hard stop, things like that. And then the final pillar is logs. Logs, going to the car analogy, is like that black box. I don't actually, I assume you've got them in the States. We have them in the UK. If you're a new driver, if you want cheaper insurance, you'll often get a black box put in your car so that they can start having kind of logs of different events that you had when you accelerated too fast or broke too fast. And so you'll have these events marked, and so that they're kind of like the logs. Salesforce, I guess the best out of the box example for Salesforce logs is probably the event monitoring that you get. But there's often lots of custom frameworks available, and we will talk about those as well. So those are your main three pillars. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a deep dive on them all and show you two sides of it. One, I'll show you how you can deal with them purely within Salesforce. But then I'll also touch upon how you can then take them out of Salesforce and extend it in an observability platform. And one of the advantages of extending it in an observability platform is then you're no longer just getting the Salesforce point of view, but if your Salesforce has got lots of integrations here and there, API requests, calling other APIs, or other APIs are calling you, etc., you're starting to get a much fuller picture of the whole system and not necessarily just Salesforce itself. Whether you need an observability tool is very much depending on the maturity of what you need. If you've just got a small org with not many integrations, it's probably pushing it too far. So you're better to start with the tools that are available in Salesforce, but then we can extend it. So yeah, make sure, I'm going to talk about some of these tools today, but make sure that you're not doing more than you need to just because it's available and just because Ellie said on this call that we should be doing observability tools. If it's not right for you, it's not right, but it's there. When I'm talking about observability tools, here are just some of the observability tools that are out there. So Datadog's the one I'm going to be focusing on when I'm showing you today. That's the one that I've used at the companies I've been at, and so therefore it's the one I've got the most maturity and experience of. I've started to play around with both New Relic and Grafana, but I do not feel I'm at a point to start showing people what I've done and telling people how to do it yet. Whereas Datadog, I've done some proper implementation in the real world, and therefore I feel a little bit more confident. But there's probably a lot more in Datadog that can be done that even I'm still not doing yet. But if you've not used Datadog before, it'll all be brand new to you, so it'll be very exciting anyway. Okay, so first I'm going to touch upon traces. Like I mentioned earlier, traces I tend to equate to the user debug logs the most. In other systems outside of Salesforce, you'll often have things like telemetry that you can feed into these things like Datadog to create these traces. Salesforce doesn't have this telemetry ready yet. I have spoken to a product manager who was kind of indicating that maybe it might be coming in the future, but open forward-looking statement and all that. So I can't make any promises. I have no idea, but I'd hope it does. And I also know that Agentforce, I think there's a beta around some telemetry around that could potentially be pushed to these platforms. But I haven't played around too much with that myself yet. So there are bad things around debug logs. I'm sure you guys will know these limitations. So obviously you have to manually enable them, which means sometimes you're not enabling them until after the issue's occurred, and then you can't replicate the issue and you've got nothing. So they have to be manually enabled per user, and not only can you not really realistically enable every user all the time because they only last 24 hours, but there's actually performance issues on that, as I mentioned at the bottom, because creating these logs then does impact your org performance. The logs only last 24 hours, so you lose them after that, and there's limited log storage, meaning that after, if you did enable them for everyone, you'd soon fill that up and you'd stop storing them anymore. The other thing I haven't popped in is you can often get truncated logs in there, so you're not getting the full line in the debug log, meaning you're not getting the information that you necessarily need. So I've just talked about all the things I hate about debug logs, but there are some really positive stuffs about them. For starters, they're simple and they're built directly into Salesforce. So apart from the manually enabling them, they're there, they're ready to work, no setup needed. You get real-time log viewing of them, and they do offer some really good execution insights. And some of the areas that they can be really particularly useful, I've found from my experience, is for performance issues where you're finding that something is not performing very well. You can really use these to dig down and understand why that is and which area it is. When you're looking at debug logs, there's a few different ways you can do it. The first way that people probably learn is using the developer console. So I'm doing some live demos today. I normally do recordings. Today I'm doing it live. Fingers crossed this all works. So let's move over to my org. I've got some logs that have just been running in the background here. I'm going to open up a log, and most of the time when you open up a log, you're probably used to seeing this view, and this is probably the view that most people use when you're looking at debug logs. If you've got system debugs in your code, you can click debug only to get those debugs. You can search for specific things. So if there's a validation rule you want to look up, you can. I don't have a validation rule in here, but I could start typing in there to search for specific keywords that I was looking for in them. But they can be quite long and difficult to look through. What I've often not seen people aware of is that you can actually change your view of these logs just here in the dev console itself. And I know that they're getting rid of the dev console eventually, or they want to get rid of the dev console eventually, and I can understand why, but I still really like it for some of this. So what you can do is you can switch perspective, and there's actually got some other predefined perspectives, and you can even make your own one. My personal favorite one is this analysis one. So if I switch over to that, you get a whole different view. You still get this list of all the lines in this top right hand corner, and you can store your debug only in there and things like that. However, my favorite thing is if you switch this execution overview to timeline, you start to actually see the timeline of the transaction. So you can actually see we had a call out here and we had another call out here, and that most of the time for this transaction was taken up in this call out here. And if I click on that, it gets a little red box on it, and you get the lines that were specific to that call out, so you can get the more detail on that specific part of the call out. Click on any bit of it, you can look around. So that's really useful for understanding the timeline of it all. And you've also got some other things up here, such as your execution tree. If I just move things around, because I can move that around, you can also see your tree. So this all started from a queuable handler called an Apex class, had some methods within there, and you can see each method. You can see how long it lasted. You can even see the heap size of it while it was running. So you can use this to help do performance testing to see whether method A or method B is more performant, and actually have real data. So that's looking at debug logs within Salesforce itself without any other external tools, just within your dev console. But many of you probably know you can also look at debug logs in VS Code. There's a few different ways to get them in VS Code. If you want to, you can even download them from your dev console and paste them in there, or you can set tracing and get logs created in here. However you get them in here, once they're in here, there's a few different things you can do in here. I'll quickly show you the Apex log analysis, but the other thing you can do is you can actually do this replay of the log as well, which I won't step through today, partly because I couldn't get it working earlier when I was trying to do it, but because I'm on a new machine and I haven't got it set up right. But you can actually step through the log and it will go through it all and see where everything went. But with the log analysis, you can click up there, do your log analysis, and you get similar things to what you see in Dev Console, but just shown slightly different. So here again, we've got the timeline of the transaction, and you can see the different layers of what happened in each space. So we've got the little peaks, and again it levels up, so it goes into, it's starting at the class level and then going into the methods, and so you can see there all that. Similar to what we saw in the top left hand corner, you've got your call tree that you can look at to see again the similar thing but in a different view, and you can start to see the times that things took, just like we saw in the dev console. Then we can start to get into a bit more analysis of it all. And my favorite one is the database one. You can start to see things like the DMLs that took place and the SQL queries that took place, or if you had SOSL queries, you'd have SOSL queries in here as well. So this just there could be a whole different session on how to use the log analysis as well as the replay debugger. I've included some links that I'll share at the end, but just to make you aware, if you didn't, that this exists, and this is a really good way to also kind of look through your logs rather than having to look through it line by line, to look through it and see the different things around what ran and how long it took. So this is particularly, like I said, for performance testing, this is particularly good for identifying what is taking the length of time that's making the performance poor. That is all I'm going to talk about for user debug logs today. Here are just some screenshots that I put in case my live demo went wrong that I could potentially talk through. That I think went okay, so I will move on to metrics. So metrics, like I said, I tend to think about limits. There could be other things you could do. You could work out metrics to do with how often flows had run. You could do metrics to do with field population, so which fields are the most populated and which fields aren't the most populated. Anything where there's like a number that could change over time, so you can see how it goes, like whether things are improving or getting worse, could be a metrics. But limits is probably the simplest and easiest one to think about it. Like I said earlier, there are two different kind of limits that we want to talk about. So one is organizational limits, data storage, file storage limits, daily API requests. Those top ones are the ones that I've probably seen the biggest issues occurring from my experience, that can really cause problems. So there are some other examples. Obviously, there's way more limits than that, as I'm sure you all know. But just some things around the organization limits. And some of these are hard limits, like, as I'm sure you know, daily API request limit. You hit that limit, you cannot do it anymore. They won't let you keep doing it and charge you. It will literally cut off. And so that can break really important things if you let it let it hit the limit. So it's a really good idea to be able to have something to warn you if you're going to hit that limit, or understand how close you are to that limit. And then on the transactional side, each transaction has got its own limits. As I'm sure you're aware, CPU time, limit, SOQL queries, DMLs, all that stuff, which is developer 101. Make sure you don't put DMLs in loops because there's a limit. But the reason why I think it's good to get metrics on this is because sometimes especially if you're working with legacy code and you just keep trying to build on top of it because it's more it's easier just to build on top of it than to try to fix it. You can find yourself hitting points where you do end up hitting things like heap size limits or CPU time limits, or if you've got lots of flows and triggers running on the same object, you can hit SOQL query limits or DML limits. And so what you could potentially do with metrics here is kind of keep an eye on each transaction, and set some kind of alert up when you're getting within 80 or 90% of the limit, so that you're getting to it before it hits the limit, and you can try to then improve the performance of it, reduce the SOQL queries if that's what's needed, or work to improve your CPU time before you get to the point where it's actually causing a problem. So that's, like I said at the start, instead of reacting to the fire that's happened, you're now stopping the fire from happening in the first place. I'm going to show you some work I've done around organizational limits today, but I'm working on getting some stuff around transactional limits. There is an App Exchange product out there. So if you're staying within Salesforce, you don't have the team or the complexity that means you need to have a separate tool. There are a number of App Exchange apps out there that are free, that can help you with looking at your org limits. This one is called org limits. If I go here, I've got it live in this org. So it gives you an overview of some of the more common limits that can cause issues, such as your daily API request and your data storage. Again, it is just giving you this point in time view. So right now it's at 80%. That doesn't tell me where it was a week ago, which could be useful to start understanding how much it's actually going up by. I'll show you in a minute how we can get around that. So yeah, this is just giving you a quick overview of all your limits here. Very similar to also Salesforce Inspector Reloaded, which I'm sure you guys know has also got its org limits. So if you want to look at this, you can see you might not even want an App Exchange product App Exchange package, you can just look at this, which isn't loading for some reason. It hates me. Let me try and refresh. Okay, I'm going to hope that you've all seen the limits in Inspector Reloaded, because for some reason it doesn't seem to want to work right now, but it normally does work really well. And it's normally the first place I go to until I get my observability set up properly to check the limits in my org. The thing that this package gives you that the Salesforce Inspector that's my Google thinking I'm talking to that. The thing that this gives you that Inspector Reloaded doesn't is there's a little thing that allows you to actually schedule an alert here. So I can say at 8 o'clock every day, check what the limit is. Check all your limits. If any of those limits are above a certain percent, so 50 was the default, but I could change that to 60% if I wanted to. So let's do that. I can decide how many times a day it runs it. So 1 or 6 times a day, and I can also get it sent to a second email other than my own email. So if you've got an email that automatically sends something to Slack or Teams or something, you could potentially put that email in. You can schedule it, and then when that runs, because it does run on a schedule, so it won't capture the breach as soon as it happens, but the next time it runs, you will get an alert if it's above the percentage. So in this instance, if I was to set this up, the next time it ran, I would get an alert on the data storage because we're above that 60%. So that's just Salesforce, a free app exchange. So it's Salesforce Labs. So obviously it's not supported by Salesforce, but you can normally have a pretty good trust and reliability for the Salesforce Labs products. But like I said, this is still only giving you a point in time. So I can see my data storage is at 80%, but how long has it been at 80%? Is it going up rapidly or is it going up slowly? And so have I got 2 weeks or have I got 2 months before I need to worry about it hitting 100%? And this is where it's easier if we take it outside Salesforce. So what I've actually done is I've set up a scheduled Apex that just runs every 15 minutes. It captures the limits from Salesforce, then sends them as a metric into Datadog. It's actually a really simple bit of code. It's not that complex. You could probably even do it potentially with a flow. You'd probably need an Apex action in there actually to get the limits. But this is the daily API request consumption. So I can actually see over the last day, this is, I would go back further, but I only set it up yesterday, so it only cuts out halfway through. But in theory, you've had this running for weeks, you would be able to see it for weeks. And you can see the API consumption. And thankfully, the API requested consumption hasn't gone above 10%. But if I go back to this dashboard, we can see that the data storage is up. We can see how steadily that's going up. And so that's gone up by about 20% every few hours. And so now I can go, I need to start taking action now, because in about another 2 hours, that's potentially going to hit 100% and my org may stop. Obviously in production, Salesforce will normally let you go over and then start telling you you're over, you either need to cut some or we'll start charging you. So data storage isn't so much of a hard limit in production. In sandboxes, if you hit 110%, normally those sandboxes will just stop and you can't add any more data to them. So this might be something that is actually potentially even better in a sandbox if you've got a dev sandbox that's constantly getting low, high on storage, low on storage, whichever way around it is. You can start to get understanding around that usage and what you need to do around that. So that's how I'm dealing with limits specifically as metrics within Salesforce. Then these are just screenshots. Let me just check if there's anything else I've missed. Nope. Cool. So now we're going to go into logs. So logs, I talked about event monitoring. When people hear event monitoring, a lot of people might just be automatically thinking Shield. You need Shield for event monitoring. That's not true. If you didn't know, if you have an Enterprise Unlimited or Performance Edition, since 2 winters ago, I think it was. So I think it's been about 18 months now. They actually gave all those editions free access to these 7 events. So you can actually turn on event monitoring for these events. They only have a 1-day data retention. or you can pay extra to have them retained for up to a year. But some of these are really useful. The top one is the one I have found to be the most important so far. I don't know if you know this. I'm sure everyone here has seen an Apex unexpected exception email, and we either ignore them and pretend they don't exist, or panic, or whatever. But you don't get an email for every Apex unexpected exception. There's kind of, depending on what instance you're on, if you've got another customer who's got hundreds of thousands of these going and they use up all the email allowance for that hour, no more emails will go out for these Apex unexpected exceptions. And so you might have these happening and you don't even know because you're not getting the email, but you always get the event. So in a minute, I'll show you where you can go to look for that within Salesforce itself. But you could also use Datadog to also capture them, and I'll show you how that can be done, how easily that can be done in Salesforce. Obviously, if you do have Shield, you get a lot more additional events. It's a much longer list. I'm not going to go through it all. If you've got Shield, you've probably done some research on it already. And you probably, I think if you get Shield, you automatically get CRM analytics, which can actually be pretty useful as well for doing some analysis on it. But for anyone who doesn't know how you can actually see these events within Salesforce itself, it is from your setup. If you type in your quick find event log file browser, it's in here. It's obviously the page I've already got open. Like I said, you can have a day's worth. So if I went back to the 19th, this org will probably not have any, although it's a developer edition org, so it might, because so this is an org. This is not an org that's got Shield, but because it's a developer edition org designed for a few things, it keeps things for a little bit longer. But I'm going to just go and look. I think I've got some Apex exceptions that I set up. So here you can see we've got a list of all the Apex exceptions, and you can annoyingly download each one individually as a CSV. So it's a bit frustrating. You can also get these events via Apex. So you could run some anonymous Apex to get them. And like I said, if you've got Shield, CRM analytics, you can do analysis of. But if you think you're not getting any Apex unaccepted exceptions, it's worth just going here and double checking, because when I realized this was available and I went to check our org, I realized that there were tons that we were getting from a few different sources that we didn't know about, and was quite a surprise, and we went in and started fixing. So just go and check. You might be fine, but there might be some surprises in there that I recommend you look at. But if you do have Datadog, and like I said, Datadog's the one I know, so I don't know whether the other systems have this or not, but it does actually have a kind of out-the-box integration with Salesforce for certain events, which does include the Apex unexpected exception events. I've added a few in here, other ones as well. You can set up which events you want to subscribe to and which ones you don't want to. You can even subscribe to custom objects and custom platform events. And you can even upload records, like from so say you've got an object called countries where you store all your countries, you could even add that as a reference table to refer to something else. So this all set up, and you can choose which you have and which you don't have. The other thing I just wanted to show you is Datadog has some kind of, the integration has some built-in rules. So this is a security type thing. And so it's got some out-of-the-box detection rules around, things like Salesforce. It will highlight and alert on things like Salesforce brute force attacks, and I won't read them all, and there's on that second page here, but I'll show you where that can come up. So with this integration, you will get this out of the box dashboard. This is just a demo org with not real production data in, so take it with a pinch of salt, but you can see things like API limit, how much is remaining. You may be wondering, well, if you can do that, why have you built this custom thing? So API limit we could get using this integration, but data storage you can't. This only includes certain limits in it. It doesn't capture all the limits. And data storage was one that I wanted to understand how we could view for real-time use case, and I could not use this out of the box integration, so I had to build the custom one that I built. But if if API is the one that you're more worried about, you probably don't need to worry about that custom one. You could use this. A few other things that we've got in there is it uses it to be able to see, you can see where people have logged in from. And another way that we used this was we actually have, at one of my old companies, we had a kind of a table of what risk every country was. And so, say, for example, Russia was listed as a high risk country. If we got a user who logged in from Russia, we actually were able to set up an alert on Datadog to get us a warning that someone had logged in from Russia, because we've got this ability to see where they've logged in from. I won't go through everything in here, but you can see for yourself that it captures a lot of stuff, and a lot of this stuff is empty, partly because it's not a proper production org, and some of it is because it's very specific to Shield stuff. Here, where I was talking about the cloud, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but the stuff that comes out of the box, here's where you can see the results of that, and things that it finds as risky things will be highlighted to you here. And you can even set up custom objects to get streaming of your custom objects, and that's here, or your custom platform events is here. So that's a lot of the out of the box stuff with Salesforce. So the first thing I showed you that I with these data storage, that was something custom that I added via an API myself from Salesforce. Whereas this is all the stuff out of the integration that was just set up here. So that's around event monitoring. But sometimes event monitoring doesn't always cover everything you want. Event monitoring is only for the things that Salesforce have already set up and want you to have events on. You might want to have your own events set up that capture more detail or specific circumstances. And that's where you might want to start thinking about having a custom login framework. Some other reasons why you might want to have a custom login framework is because of the temporary data retention of those event files. They do only last a day, although if you're pushing them into Datadog, they last longer, but they do only last a day in Salesforce. There's limited scope in them. They don't necessarily give you the actionability that you need by just looking at the events. Whereas on a login framework, you can start to have things that can actually provide you with better actionability on it after you've received the information, because you can have all the observability in place, all the logs being created and the metrics being done, but it's nothing if you're not actually going to take action on it. And having a custom login framework can help you with taking the action on it. You could build your own. I know people have built your own. I think the first time I ever used platform events, it was for my own little custom login network framework. And then I discovered, why did I do that? There's all these ones out there already. So Nebula Log is the one I'm most common with, and the one I'll be talking about a little bit today. But there is also one from RFlib. There's a login utility in the App Exchange. I've got links to them all at the end. And for me, I think it's better just to use one that's already there, because they've got all the bells and whistles. So for some people, they might be too, like I said at the beginning, everyone's in a different org, everyone's got different situations. So for some, they might feel like they're over engineering. So therefore, you might want to just build a simple one that just does what you need instead of all the extra bells and whistles. But I really like some of the bells and whistles that come with Nebula Logger. So let me just, for anyone who hasn't seen Nebula Logger before, I think it is, I personally love it. This is just a page that I've created just to help me create some random logs. So I'm just going to click some buttons so we can get some nice fresh logs created. That's an incorrect error saying it was actually meant to be an error, and that's fine. So if I now go back to the list view, we will see some brand new logs have been created. And I'm going to go and have a look at this. So just to understand how it works, it creates a log which covers the whole transaction. And in that transaction, something I'm going to come back to later, you will have the request ID, and that is essentially the transaction ID, the request ID. That's going to be the same over all of the entries within that log. And then within that log, you could have one or you could have as many entries as you want. So the first entry I've got is that I'm trying to update a contact, and the second entry is saying, well, that failed. And you can see we've got different login levels. So we've got an info level for the one where we're trying to update the contact, but then we've got the error level where it actually failed. And if I open up that log entry, this is one of the things I love about it, is we get the message. So this is the message that I passed through for it to create in the log, and we get the stack trace for it. But then we actually see the source code without having to go out to VS Code to go, oh, it was from login demo class and the create exception log link to contact method. We can actually look at that code straight here and have a look at what's going on, and go, oh, it was line 44. It's here where this log got created. And so now you guys can see how easy it was for me to get that log created as well, because I've just called the logger class, done it as an exception, set the message as the message, I've passed the contact that it failed on, and then passed the whole exception into the log. And so that's given me that code. But because I've done it as an exception and passed the exception on, I've also got all of the exception details as well. So I've got the exception type and the message and the stack trace of where the exception actually happened, because up here it was just where the log was. The exception may have been on a completely different class, certainly a different method, and so down here we can now actually see where the exception happened, and here it's literally just 2 lines above it. But sometimes obviously it wouldn't be that easy to see. One of the things that Nebula Logger gives you as well, which is where you could start building some alerting around your limits for transactions, is it automatically captures your transaction limits for certain things for every log and log entry that it creates. So we can automatically see here that the heap size limit it used 0.8%, which means I don't have to worry about this because it's not getting anywhere near to heap size. But if it was, you could start to then take action on it by seeing that. Just while we're looking at logs, there is another log I want to show you, because this is another thing that I think is really useful. It must be this one. So if you're doing either a call out of Salesforce or you've got a custom call out into Salesforce, you can actually call some methods that just come with Nebula Logger, where you can pass the request into a method, pass the result into a method, response into a method. You get a new tab for HTTP callout in this case. So this is a callout from Salesforce. And you get all the information about that request just added. So you've got the endpoint, the method, if there was a body, the body, and then we get the status code, the status, and everything about the response as well, just using 2 lines, and we get that all in the log so that we can see exactly what happened with that request, which I think are super useful. So that's if you want to do some kind of login within just Salesforce itself. A few things to be aware of is that Nebula Logger by default uses platform events. So if you are in a platform event heavy org, it might not be good for you. The other thing is it does create actual records in your org, and so you do need to be wary to make sure that you start deleting them. Nebula Logger comes with scheduled apex that you can set up to automatically delete them after however many days you set up. 14 is the default, but you could have them deleted after a day, you could have them deleted after 30 days. What you could do though is you could push them outside of Salesforce to something like Datadog. And this is when things start to come into their own, because now not only have we got logs from Salesforce, but we can connect those logs to logs from outside Salesforce. So we can start to not just see in that request response what Salesforce saw, but we can see what happened then at the other end of the API, assuming it was your own API and not a third party's API. You can start to see what happened after we called it and what happened in the custom API at that end. But what's taking this to the next level then as well, so just so you can see these are what the logs look like, I'm choosing what fields I send to Datadog here, so you can pick whichever fields are the most relevant to you. But I did want to call out this request ID that I talked about in the log earlier, because if you are starting to have logs all in one place for different systems, what would be super handy is if you started to have all the transactions having the same request ID, so you could easily track them. And just about a month or so ago, there was this article on Salesforce developer blog that I loved. and it's about actually setting up that cost system observability with correlation IDs. The article will go into a lot more detail about how to do it with platform events and flows, but I did a quick play around with APIs and Apex. So I just want to quickly show you that. I'm just calling it from Postman, but imagine that it was another system and it's calling into Salesforce. If they set this as a one in the header, x-sfdc-request-id, and then put in a random request ID, I'm putting London's call in 2026, but obviously that wouldn't be what it was, but they can set it themselves. If I send this to this custom endpoint, then the transaction ID for receiving that in Salesforce, oh, whoops, hang on, let me authorize first. Quickly, let me send that. And then send it again. There we go. Perfect. Then the transaction in Salesforce will also have that request ID. So, excuse me, if I go back to Salesforce now and look at the logs, find the logs and refresh this. This is the inbound log. If I go to the details, you can see that request ID has actually been set to London's call in 2026. And similarly, I can then add that to a header in an outbound call if I was then having one coming in and one going out, so that we're actually following this transaction all the way through with that same ID from both inside Salesforce and outside Salesforce. So that is that. I think that's the last one. Oh, I'm going to mention AI because, it's Salesforce and you have to mention AI. But I haven't played around with it too much. But the introduction of agents does mean that we need to have a little bit of an evolution of observability, because we're no longer just observing systems. We're now also observing the decisions that agents are making. That means that, we used to talk about logs, metrics, and traces. But now we want to start thinking about reasoning. It's no longer just the what, but we also want to understand why. Why did the agent make that decision? With traditional observability, failures are a lot more visible. With agents, they can be some really catastrophic failures could be a lot more silent and happen before anyone can do anything about it. You hear about agents going rogue and giving huge refunds or things like that shouldn't have been allowed. Hopefully getting better, but that can happen and you don't even know it because it's happening silently. We're no longer debugging code, we are now debugging behavior. In the link at the end, there's some links around some observability for agents that Salesforce has got out there. I'm not going to go into detail of it other than saying for agents, it's even more important that we're doing observability because we need to understand even more about what's happening. So it's an area that I'm continuing to explore. And that, I talk really quickly. I hope you all heard me and I didn't speak too long, but that is that. This is a QR code that takes you to a link tree with all kinds of, I hope, helpful resources for you. I don't know if we've got time for any questions. There was probably some questions in the chat while I was talking that I didn't look at. But yeah, feel free to come off mute, ask questions, tell me it was terrible. I don't mind.
It was great. Can you go back to the QR code?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add something about Nebula Logger. I believe you can, because I worked with it recently and I had to do some configuration on it. I believe you can configure it to use things besides platform events.
Yeah, you can do there's a few other options. So you can do asynchronous Apex, and you can do synchronous Apex. Okay. But the problem with synchronous Apex, if you want to log errors, is the log won't get created because it's synchronously, and so therefore if the transaction rolls back, the log will roll back. Sorry, I've got you guys over there, so I'm looking at you guys over there. So it looks like I'm not looking at you, but yeah, the problem with the synchronous one is if you're trying to log errors, it won't catch because it rolls back. But yeah, you can do async Apex as well. Was there any more? I'm just going to try and open up the chat, but my mouse is being weird. There you go. Oh, no questions in the chat.
This was really comprehensive. I can say for myself, this is not. It was so bad, I don't have any questions. It was so good, I don't have any questions.
I did just see a question from Jason. Do you need a special VS Code extension to view the Apex logs there? I don't think it's a special extension. It may be. So there's 2 versions of the sales. Am I still? I am still showing my screen, aren't
Yeah,
I?
it comes with the extension pack. You get
Yeah.
the replay debugger and the relay logs with the Salesforce extension pack. Yeah.
I can't find it on here right now, but yeah, it should just cut off because I'm typing on the wrong keyboard. So it just comes with this one. So there's the replay debugger that I was talking about. Again, I didn't have time to go into that because I think I was already overrunning. I need to get that cut down because I've only got 40 minutes for London schooling. But there we go. And then here's the Apex log analyzer that comes with it. But yeah, it should just come out of the box with those extensions. Any tool from? No, I'm sorry, Rishab. I haven't come across anything because unfortunately, managed packages are black boxes for the most part, isn't it? It's dependent on the managed package provider. Although Paul Fox is telling me differently.
Yeah, so for managed packages that have gone through Salesforce's, like basically you have it connected to your partner business org, you do get usage data in the form of package usage logs, and they are the worst format ever. You can submit to their API to download a CSV, and then you have to put that CSV somewhere. So this varies a lot. There is a application on the App Exchange that you can look into. I forget what it's called. It's something very descriptive, like App Exchange App Analytics or something like that. Personally, our company downloads the CSVs, stores them in Snowflake, and then we use Metabase to report on them. Package usage logs give you things like the unexpected exceptions and DML and stuff like that. They also support custom interactions. So for things that we actually want to measure, we actually have in our code basically what Ellie was demonstrating with Nebula Logger, where our code will log a special interaction. There's a lot of restrictions there because Salesforce doesn't want you to like actually pass data out. So like you can't log a string. You can't pass very many pieces of information to it all, but you can create enums in your code and log those values, and then they show up in the package usage logs.
Cool. Just for anyone, I'm going to talk about Nebula Logger. Nebula Logger, you can have it as a managed package, but you can have it as an unlocked package, so you can extend it yourself. You can add various things to it, change the layouts, do various extensions to it if you wanted to. So you're not necessarily stuck with exactly what it gives.
If you go that route, make sure you subscribe to the Git repo to keep up with
Yes.
updates.
That's true. That is true. And then make sure you remember what changes you made. So when you get those updates, make sure your changes are still in there and you don't override your own changes.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was okay. But if you've got any feedback to make it better for London schooling, other than shorter, yeah, thank you so much for letting me do this.
Thank you so much for doing this presentation.
Yeah.
Ellie is not in our Slack, so if you have any feedback, feel free to post it in Slack and just tag me or Lauren or any of the leaders, and we will forward it to Ellie, or connect with her on LinkedIn.
Go Datadog. A friend of mine works there. I think they're based out of Denver, actually, where I live. So.
Did not know they were at Denver. That's cool.
Paul, if our company may or may not have pinged us with an urgent request in the middle of Ellie's presentation, where will the recording be?
Yeah, so I will. It's been a while since I've done these virtual things, but
Okay.
pretty sure the recording comes to us within a couple of hours, and then I will post it in Slack.
Thank you.
So, and if anybody is joining us that's not in our Slack and wants the link, feel free to reach out to it however you found out about this meeting, and we'll get the recording to you. Ellie, I'll share it with you as well in case you want to review it before your presentation.
That would be amazing. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Ellie, and thanks everybody that joined us. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Good luck with all the security changes, and look forward to seeing all the things you've observed in your orgs in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Have a
much.
good day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.